He told her she was nothing without him. He was the successful one, the one with the future. She was just the ex-wife he left behind, a waitress in a cheap uniform. He took every chance he got to show off his new car, his new girlfriend, his new life, laughing as she served him coffee. He thought her life was over. What he didn't know was that her real life was just beginning. He was about to learn that the woman he dismissed as a failure was about to board a private jet, while his new life came crashing down right in front of her. The scent of burnt coffee and cheap lemon disinfectant clung to Alara Vance's polyester uniform. It was a smell she couldn't scrub from her skin, a constant pungent reminder of how far she had fallen. At 32, her life was a checklist of failures, a recently finalized divorce, an abandoned career in architectural design, and a tiny drafty studio apartment above a laundromat that always smelled like damp dryer sheets. Her ex-husband Mark had kept the house. He had also kept the car, the friends, and as he'd so kindly informed her during the separation, his ambition. "Let's be realistic, Alara," he had said, his voice laced with that infuriatingly placid condescension. "I'm on a partner track. You design things that are emotionally resonant. Nobody pays for emotionally resonant. They pay for 4,000 square feet of beige efficiency." Now she was a waitress at the Silver Spoon, a bistro that was neither silver nor served by spoons you'd trust. Her feet ached. A dull throb behind her eyes signaled a coming migraine. She was refilling a salt shaker when the bell above the door chimed, bringing in a gust of cold November air, and the two people she least wanted to see. Mark and her. Isabella was 5 years younger than Alara Blonde in a way that required a bi-weekly salon visit, and poured into a red dress that cost more than Alara's monthly rent. Mark, in a tailored Zegna suit that Alara remembered picking out, had his arm draped possessively around Isabella's waist. He looked shiny. His new teeth-whitening routine, his obnoxious Rolex, the smug sheen of his new life. They didn't see her at first. They chose the best table in the house, the window booth, and Mark immediately started talking too loudly about a 7-figure deal he'd just closed. Alara's manager, a sour-faced man named Greg, nudged her. "Vance, booth 4, and try to look like you're not at a funeral." Her stomach twisted. She grabbed 2 menus, the laminated edges sticky. Every step toward them felt like walking through wet cement. When she reached the table, she held the menus out, her voice a practiced flat monotone. "Welcome to the Silver Spoon. Can I get you started with some—" "Alara?" Mark's voice was a performance of surprise. He looked up, his eyes widening in mock pity. "Wow, I didn't know you were here." Isabella giggled, a sound like glass breaking. "Oh, Mark, honey, is this the ex—" She looked Alara up and down, her gaze lingering on the small permanent coffee stain on her apron. "You were right. She is very domestic." The insult was designed to sting, and it did. Domestic was Mark's code word for unambitious and plain. "Babe, be nice," Mark said, though he was clearly enjoying himself. He leaned back, stretching his arm along the back of the booth. "So, Alara, this is what you're doing now. Waitressing, I mean, it's honest work. Good for you, really." Alara's knuckles were white on the menus. "What can I get for you?" She repeated, her voice tighter. "I'll have a double espresso," Mark said. "And Isabella." "Just a sparkling water, with a lot of lime," Isabella trilled, already pulling out her phone to take a selfie, puckering her lips. "The lighting in here is tragic, by the way." As Alara walked away, Mark's voice carried across the room. "Can you believe that my ex-wife? She used to talk about designing museums. Now she's serving me coffee. Life's funny, right?" The other diners studiously ignored them, but Alara felt their pitying glances. She prepared the drinks, her hands shaking so badly she nearly spilled the espresso. The hot liquid scalded her fingers, but she barely felt it. The burn in her chest was worse. When she returned, Mark was waiting. "Oh, hey, Alara," he said, pulling a set of keys from his pocket and dropping them on the table. They weren't his old Honda keys. They were for a Porsche. You didn't see us pull up, did you? I just got the new 911 Carrera. A little gift to myself for the promotion. You know, the one at the firm you said was soul-crushing. Congratulations, Mark, Ilara said, placing the water down. Yeah, and Izzy and I are heading to Aspen for the weekend. The company's treating. He looked at Isabella, who was now editing her photo. It's just, life is good, you know, when you finally cut out the dead weight. No offense. Of course, Ilara whispered. Mark, stop, Isabella whined. You're embarrassing your ex-maid. Let's just go. This place smells like failure. Mark laughed, throwing a $20 bill on the table for a $6 order. Keep the change, Ilara. Buy yourself something. Nice. He stood pulling Isabella close. As they walked out, he paused at the door, turned, and gave Ilara a final pitying smirk. You should have trusted me, Ilara. I was always the one going places. You're just stuck, and you always will be. The door chimed shut. The $20 bill on the table felt like a hot coal. Ilara stood there frozen as the other waiters buzzed around her. The smell of burnt coffee was suddenly overwhelming, and she ran to the back, locking herself in the staff bathroom, finally letting the silent, scalding tears fall. He was right. He was in his Porsche flying to Aspen, and she was here stuck. The humiliation of that afternoon settled into Ilara's bones, a cold, heavy ache. For 2 days she moved in a fog of self-pity. Mark's words, "You're just stuck," echoed in the drafty silence of her apartment. He had always been the one with the practical ambition while she was the dreamer. He'd supported her dreams at first, or so she'd thought. But his support had been a slow-acting poison. Honey, this design is beautiful, but it's not realistic. The budget would be insane. Maybe focus on kitchen remodels. People always need kitchens. Are you sure you want to go back to school for your master's? We're saving for a house. Ilara, my career has to be the priority right now. It's the one making real money. Slowly her portfolio filled with sweeping, sustainable designs for public spaces, museums that blended light and nature, and libraries that felt like cathedrals had gathered dust. She'd put her dreams in a box to make room for his. And when he'd left, he had taken the box too. Metaphorically. He'd left her with nothing but a shattered sense of self. On the third night after the incident, Ilara was huddled on her lumpy sofa, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, nursing a cup of tea. Her only friend in the city, her coworker Sarah, had called. "You can't let that narcissistic windbag win, Ilara," Sarah said, her voice crackling over the phone. "He wants you to feel like this. He wants you to be the tragic waitress. Don't give him the satisfaction." "It's not that easy, Sarah," Ilara whispered. He's not wrong. He is going places. I am here. So go somewhere else. You're the most talented person I know. You're a literal genius with light and space. You used to show me your sketches. Where did that woman go?" After the call, Ilara sat in the dark. Where did that woman go? She stood and walked to the closet. Behind her few items of clothing was a large black portfolio case. It wasn't the one Mark had dismissed. It was a new one. For the past 6 months, in the dead of night after her shifts, Ilara had been drawing again. She had been rebuilding. Fueled by insomnia and desperation, she'd been creating a new portfolio from scratch. The designs were bolder now, more personal. They were the work of a woman who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear in her art. She opened it. Page after page of meticulous hand-drawn blueprints and digital renderings. A self-sustaining botanical garden for an urban food desert. A library for a low-income neighborhood designed to be built from reclaimed materials. A headquarters for a new tech company, a living building that breathed with its inhabitants. She hadn't known why she was doing it. For herself, maybe. To prove she still could. An ad she had saved weeks ago popped up on her laptop. The Lockhart Innovation Prize for Architecture. It was a new prestigious award funded by the enigmatic reclusive tech billionaire Damien Lockhart. The prize was a massive grant and a mentorship. But the deadline was tonight, midnight. It was 10:47 p.m. "It's a long shot," she muttered. "They're looking for an established firm, not a waitress with a laptop." "You're just stuck." Mark's voice. "No," Alara said, her voice hard. She sat down. She scanned her best design, the living building headquarters. The prompt was to design a space that redefined the future of work. This was it. Her hands, usually so steady with a pen, shook as she navigated the online submission portal. It was an anonymous submission. No names, no resumes, just the work. The work must speak for itself, the website declared. She filled out the fields. Project title, Ethelgard, Old English for Noble Enclosure. She uploaded the renderings, the structural plans, the environmental impact reports she'd obsessively researched. At 11:58 p.m., she stared at the submit button. This was it. This was the last dying ember of the woman she used to be. She clicked the button. A simple, unadorned message appeared. "Thank you for your submission." Alara shut the laptop. She didn't feel hopeful. She didn't feel saved. She just felt empty. She had sent her last secret, her best work, out into the digital void. She took a deep breath, put her uniform in the washer for her shift tomorrow, and went to bed. A week passed, then two. The bistro's Christmas decorations, sad strands of tinsel, and a lopsided tree went up. Alara continued her routine work, sleep, eat, repeat. She'd completely forgotten about the submission. It was a lottery ticket she'd bought and immediately lost. Then an email appeared in her inbox. It wasn't from the Lockhart Prize. The sender was DL Executive Office. The subject line was simply, "Your submission." "Ms. Vance, your portfolio, Ethelgard, has generated significant interest. We would like to discuss it with you in person. A car will be waiting for you tomorrow at 4:00 p.m. at your address. Please confirm your availability. The location will be provided to the driver. Please bring your full digital portfolio." Alara's blood ran cold. It was a scam. It had to be. Significant interest. A car. It was the kind of email that ended with you giving your bank details to a foreign prince. She showed it to Sarah during their break. Sarah squinted at the screen. "Alara, this is weird. DL Executive Office. But it's not asking for money. What if it's real? What if you won? They would have announced it. They would have called. It's unprofessional and creepy. You know what's also unprofessional and creepy? Your ex-husband. What do you have to lose?" Sarah gripped her arm. "This is not a scam. This is the universe finally paying you back. You have to go." The next day, Alara called in sick to the bistro, a small act of rebellion that made her feel giddy. At 3:59 p.m., she was standing on the curb outside her building wearing her one good outfit, a simple black sheath dress, her old architecture portfolio case now holding her laptop, and a trench coat. At 4:00 p.m. on the dot, a black Audi A8, the kind that looks like it's carved from a block of obsidian, pulled up. A driver in a crisp suit stepped out, opened the rear door, and said, "Ms. Vance, Mr. Lockhart is expecting you." Lockhart. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It wasn't a scam. The drive was silent, winding through downtown to the most expensive, exclusive new building in the city, the Apex Tower. The driver escorted her past the doorman into a private elevator. He used a key and the button for the penthouse lit up. The elevator opened directly into the apartment, or rather a glass-walled palace in the sky. The entire space was minimalist, masculine, and screamed money, but quiet money. Polished concrete floors, dark wood, and a floor-to-ceiling view of the entire city skyline. A man stood with his back to her, looking out the window. "Ms. Vance," he said. His voice was deep, resonant. Not loud, but it filled the space. He turned around. He was not what she expected. He wasn't a flashy tech bro type. He was perhaps in his late 30s, with dark, intense eyes, a sharp jaw, and a quiet, almost severe intensity. He wore a simple, perfectly cut gray sweater and dark trousers. He looked more like a modern philosopher than a billionaire. This was Damien Lockhart. "Mr. Lockhart," Elara said, her voice a reedy whisper. I thought the prize was anonymous." "It was," Damien said, gesturing for her to sit on a low modern sofa. He did not sit. He prowled the room, a predator in his natural habitat. The judges, a panel of deans from MIT and Yale, chose their top 3. Your Ethelgard was their unanimous first choice. But I overruled them. Alara's heart sank. "You overruled them. So I didn't win." "Of course. It was all a cruel joke." "No," he said, stopping to look at her. "You didn't win. I hated your design." Elara blinked. I'm sorry." "I hated it," he repeated, "because it was submitted to the wrong contest. A prize is a toy. A grant is an insult for this level of work. This," he said, tapping a tablet on the marble coffee table, "is not a proposal. It's a solution." He swiped the screen, and her own renderings filled a massive digital wall. "You designed a building that creates its own energy via microbial fuel cells in the foundation. Your living ventilation system uses symbiotic plant life to scrub CO2 and reduce HVAC loads by 40%. You didn't just redefine the workplace, Ms. Vance. You made every other skyscraper in this city obsolete." He was quoting her. He was quoting the technical specs she thought no one would even read. I just thought it was a more efficient way to build," she stammered. "It is." He fixed her with a gaze so intense it felt physical. "I am not a philanthropist, Ms. Vance. I am a builder. The Lockhart Prize was a front. I wasn't looking for a winner. I was looking for an architect. I am building a new global headquarters in London, a $500 million project, and I want you to design it." Alara's mind went blank. The room tilted. "Me, but I don't have a firm. I don't have a license in the UK. I'm a waitress." The admission hung in the air. Damien Lockhart didn't even blink. "I don't care if you're a neurosurgeon or a shepherd," he said. "The mind that created this," he pointed to her design, "is the only mind I want. My team handles the licenses, the legal, the engineering. You will be the visionary. You will have an unlimited budget, my full resources, and complete creative control." "But why?" It was all she could say. "Because," Damien said, finally coming to a stop directly in front of her, "for 10 years I've been asking architects to build me the future, and they all show me glass boxes. You showed me a building that breathes. I don't want the future, Ms. Vance. I want what comes after the future, and you're the only one who seems to know what that looks like." He extended a hand. "So, Elara Vance, do you want to build your museum?" Elara looked at her own hand, chapped and red from hot water and disinfectant. She looked at his, the hand of a man who built empires. She put her hand in his. His grip was firm, warm. "Yes," she said, her voice for the first time in years perfectly steady. "Yes, I do." "Good," he said, dropping her hand. "The car will pick you up tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Be packed." Packed for what? Damien smiled, a small, rare expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We're flying to London, to see the site. My team is already there." He turned back to the window. "You can see yourself out." Elara walked out of the Apex Tower in a daze. The world she had left 2 hours ago, a world of gray pavement and struggling to make rent, was gone. The world she was in now was hypersaturated, sharp, and terrifying. London, 9 a.m. Be packed. She got back to her apartment, and it was like seeing it for the first time. The peeling paint, the rattling radiator, the smell of the laundromat. It was a cage she hadn't realized she was in. Now the door was open. She had 13 hours. She started packing, but it was a pathetic endeavor. What did one pack for a meeting in London with a billionaire? Her bistro-worn sweaters and one good dress seemed like a joke. She settled on her most professional attire, dark trousers, a silk blouse she'd bought on clearance, and her trench coat. She packed her laptop, her chargers, and the few toiletries she had. It all fit in a single small carry-on bag. She was taping a note for her landlord when a sharp, aggressive knock echoed through the door. Her heart leaped. It couldn't be Damien. His people didn't knock. She opened the door. It was Mark. "Ilara," he said, not meeting her eyes. He was holding a small, crumpled cardboard box. You didn't respond to my texts." "I've been busy, Mark. What do you want?" "I was cleaning out the garage at the house," he said, "and I found this." He shoved the box at her. "It's your old college stuff. T-shirts, some art books. I figured you'd want it before I tossed it." He was using it as an excuse. He peered past her into the apartment, his eyes landing on her packed carry-on bag by the door. His face immediately twisted into that familiar, pitying smirk. "Oh," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Going somewhere, finally taking my advice and moving back in with your mom in Ohio." "I have to go, Mark," Ilara said, trying to close the door. He put his hand on it, stopping her. "Ilara, wait. Look." He sighed a dramatic put-upon sound. I'm worried about you. That day at the bistro. It was sad. I talked it over with Isabella and, well," he reached into his designer wallet. "I want to give you this." He pulled out a few $100 bills. "Call it severance from our old life, to help you get on your feet, find a better apartment, buy some new clothes. Something." It was the ultimate humiliation. Not just a boast, but charity, a handout. The $20 tip at the bistro had been a jab. This was a knockout punch. Ilara stared at the money. A week ago she would have needed it. A week ago she might have even been tempted to take it just to end the interaction. But this was not a week ago. This was the night before London. "I don't want your money, Mark," she said, her voice ice. He laughed, a short barking sound. "Oh, Ilara, stop. Don't be proud. Pride doesn't pay the rent. I know what you make at that dump. Just take it. Consider it a parting gift." He tried to stuff the money into her hand, but she pulled away. "I said no," she said louder now. "Why, what's going on?" His eyes narrowed, suspicion replacing the pity. He looked at the suitcase again. You didn't meet someone, did you? Some deadbeat who's taking you away from all this." He used air quotes, his face a mask of disgust. "You always had a terrible picker. Me excluded, of course." "What I'm doing is none of your business," Ilara said. She felt a cold, clear anger rising, an anger she hadn't felt in years. "My life is my own, Mark. You wanted out, remember? You're out. I'm just trying to help," he yelled, his facade cracking. He was offended that she'd refused his grand gesture. "I'm trying to be the bigger person, and you're throwing it back in my face. Fine. Be this way. Stay in your little hovel." He gestured around the tiny, cramped room. "You know this is exactly what I was afraid of. This is why I left. You had no drive. You were content to just sink. And look at you. You're sinking." "I have a flight in the morning, Mark," Ilara said, her voice quiet but final. She grabbed her suitcase. "I need to get some sleep. Goodbye." He was stunned by her sudden dismissal. "A flight? Don't tell me you're taking that community college trip to see—" He struggled. Whatever. Don't go to Spirit Airlines, Alara. They're the worst. Goodbye, Mark. This time she shoved the door. He was so surprised he stumbled back and she slammed it shut, locking the deadbolt. She heard him outside muttering, "Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. Fine rot here. See if I care." She heard his expensive shoes stomp down the stairs. Alara leaned her forehead against the cheap wood of the door. Her whole body was shaking. But it wasn't from fear or sadness. It was from adrenaline. He had just given her the final, most perfect gift. The one thing she needed more than money or validation. He gave her rage. "Sinking, am I?" she whispered to the empty room. "We'll see." She set her alarm for 6 a.m. The 9 a.m. flight was not out of JFK. It wasn't even out of Newark. The car service, another silent black-on-black Audi, took Alara to Teterboro Airport. Teterboro, New Jersey was an airport Alara had never heard of for a simple reason: it doesn't service commercial airlines. It is the exclusive domain of the rich and the powerful. It is an airport for private jets. Alara felt her insides buzzing as the car bypassed all the familiar airport corridor chaos and pulled up to a small, sleek glass and steel building. The terminal was more like a five-star hotel lobby. There was no TSA. There was no line. A woman at a single marble desk looked up, smiled, and said, "Ms. Vance, we've been expecting you." Thank you," Alara said, gripping the handle of her small carry-on. "Mr. Lockhart's plane is in its final preparations. You can wait in the lounge. May I get you a cappuccino pastries?" "No, I'm fine, thank you," Alara said, feeling profoundly not fine. She sat on a plush leather chair, her small bag at her feet, looking like it had been salvaged from a fire compared to the surrounding luxury. She watched out the window as jets, sleek, beautiful, physics-defying machines taxied, took off and landed with a quiet efficiency she'd never associated with air travel. She was so absorbed in this new world that she didn't notice the commotion outside by the public-facing fence, until she heard that laugh, that high-pitched, glassy giggle. Alara's blood froze. She looked. It was Mark and Isabella. They were standing on the outside of the airport fence on a public access road. Mark was in his Porsche, which was parked illegally. Isabella was posing against the chain-link fence, a bottle of champagne in her hand. She was wearing a massive faux fur coat and sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Alara's first thought was, "They followed me." But then she saw the third person, a stressed-looking man with a DSLR camera. Isabella would pose, pout, and hold the champagne bottle up, pointing toward the jets in the background. Then she'd check the camera, yell at the photographer, and do it again. They weren't following her. They were doing a photo shoot. Isabella was an influencer, and she was here at Teterboro pretending to live a life she didn't have. She was faking her jet-set lifestyle for Instagram using the backdrop of real private planes. Mark was her prop. He was leaning against his car, trying to look bored and wealthy, but he kept checking his phone, his face tight with annoyance. He was the fed-up Instagram husband, carrying her bags and a large silver reflector. Alara couldn't breathe. The absurdity was overwhelming. The man who had mocked her for having no drive, who had pitied her sad life, was spending his Saturday morning holding a piece of aluminum foil so his new girlfriend could pretend to be rich for her 5,000 followers. Suddenly Mark looked up. His gaze swept the terminal windows. He didn't see her, but his eyes landed on a jet that was taxiing into view, a machine so beautiful it looked like a weapon. Then he did see her. Alara was standing by the glass now. Their eyes met. Mark's jaw dropped. He literally stumbled back a step. His expression cycled through 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, anger. More confusion, and then worst of all, a dawning, hideous mockery. He thought she was here for the same reason. He grabbed Isabella's arm, pointed at Alara in the window, and they both burst out laughing. Mark pantomimed, cleaning the window. "Are you here to wash the planes, Alara?" he mouthed, cackling. Isabella, filming now, zoomed in on Alara. "Oh my God!" Her voice was audible even through the glass. "That's your ex." Is she stalking us? How pathetic. Ilara's face burned. The humiliation from the bistro was nothing compared to this. Here she was on the precipice of a new life, and her past was literally outside laughing at her through a fence. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide in the bathroom. She wanted the polished concrete floor to open up and swallow her. "Ms. Vance!" A uniformed woman was standing beside her. "Mr. Lockhart has arrived. We can escort you to the plane." Ilara turned her back to the window, her back to Mark and Isabella. "Yes, please, now." "Right this way." The woman led her not to the main door but to a private frosted glass sliding door. It opened directly onto the tarmac. The cold air hit her face. And there it was. It wasn't a small jet. It was a Gulfstream G650ER. Long, sleek, painted a deep pearlescent midnight blue. Its two massive engines were whining a sound of compressed, unimaginable power. The stairs were down a red carpet laid out on the tarmac. A black Maybach sedan, silent as a shark, was parked at the bottom of the stairs. The rear door opened and Damien Lockhart emerged. He was on his phone, finishing a call. "No, the valuation is final. $50 billion, not a dollar less. I'll be in London in 7 hours. Handle it." He snapped the phone shut and slid it into his coat. He saw Ilara. His intense face didn't smile, but it softened just a fraction. "Ilara," he said, his voice cutting through the engine whine. "You're early, I like that." He walked over to her, took her small, pathetic carry-on bag from her hand, and didn't even look at it. He just handed it to a co-pilot who had emerged. "Good, you travel light, let's go." He gestured to the stairs. This was the moment. The apex. Ilara took her first step toward the plane. "Ilara!" A voice high-pitched and frantic. It was Mark. He was screaming. He and Isabella were still at the fence, their photo shoot forgotten. Their faces were pressed against the chain link, their mouths open, their phones held up filming. They looked, Ilara thought, like animals in a zoo. Mark didn't look mocking now. He looked terrified. He knew who Damien Lockhart was. Every man in finance, every man on the partner track worshipped Damien Lockhart. He was the man they all pretended to be in their meetings. He was a myth, a ghost, and he was holding a hand out to his ex-wife. "Ilara, what are you doing?" Mark shrieked. "Who is that you can't get on that plane?" Damien Lockhart stopped. He turned slowly and looked at the two figures screaming at the fence. He looked at Mark, his face a mask of mild curiosity, as if observing a new and interesting species of insect. He looked at Ilara. "Do you know them?" he asked. Ilara looked at Mark. She looked at his Porsche, now looking like a cheap toy. She looked at Isabella, her faux fur coat, and her desperate camera phone life. She looked at the man she had loved, the man who had broken her, the man who had called her stuck and sad and dead weight. She turned back to Damien Lockhart, the man who was offering her the future. She gave him a small, cool smile. "No," she said. "I've never seen them before in my life." Damien nodded once. He placed a hand not possessively but supportively on the small of her back, guiding her up the stairs. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Vance." The heavy, soundproof door of the Gulfstream swung shut with a muted final thump. Inside the jet, the world vanished. The screaming engines were reduced to a distant humming vibration. The cabin was not the garish gold and leopard print that Isabella would have designed. It was an extension of Damien's penthouse. Understated, elegant. Cream leather, dark polished walnut, and brushed steel. It was less a plane and more a flying boardroom. "Please sit," Damien said, gesturing to a large captain's chair. "Coffee, tea, something stronger." "Coffee. Black. Please." Ilara managed her voice barely a whisper. A flight attendant appeared, took her order, and vanished. Ilara sank into the leather. It was softer than any bed she'd ever slept in. "Buckle up. We'll be wheels up in 3 minutes," Damien said, sitting opposite her, already opening his laptop. He didn't ask her about the people at the fence. He didn't ask about her life. The transaction was complete. He had hired her for her mind, and now they were going to work. "I've had my London team upload the full site specifications. I want you to look at the topographical data before we land." He was all business. This wasn't a rescue. It was an acquisition. And for Alara, that was infinitely better. It was real. As the jet began its powerful smooth taxi to the runway, Alara allowed herself one last look out the small, pristine window. On the access road, Mark and Isabella were frozen. Isabella was no longer filming. Her phone was dangling from her hand. Mark was clutching the chain-link fence, his face pale. His Porsche was still there, but a Teterboro security vehicle had just pulled up behind it, lights flashing. He was about to get a very expensive ticket. As Alara watched, Mark's knees seemed to buckle. He sagged against the fence, his entire body a question mark of failure. The man who had everything, the man who cut out the dead weight, had just watched that dead weight board a G650ER with the most powerful man he'd ever seen. The jet turned, its engines roared, and the force pushed Alara back into her seat. In seconds, they were airborne, punching through the gray New Jersey clouds and into the brilliant, blinding sunshine above. Inside the Gulf Stream, the transition was absolute. The moment the heavy, soundproof door was sealed, the entire world vanished. The screaming engines, the frantic shouts from the fence, the flashing lights of the Teterboro security car, all of it was gone, replaced by a deep, hermetic silence. The cabin was a flying monastery of productivity. All cream leather, dark polished walnut, and brushed steel. Alara sank into a captain's chair that was softer than any bed she'd ever owned. She was still trembling, the adrenaline of the confrontation at the fence warring with the sheer unreality of her surroundings. Damien Lockhart sat opposite her, already buckling his seatbelt. He hadn't asked her about the scene at the fence. He didn't ask who they were or why they were screaming. The incident had been observed, processed, and dismissed in a single silent instant. He was all business. "Wheels up in 3 minutes," he said, his voice as calm as if he were ordering a coffee. A flight attendant appeared silent as a ghost and placed a bottle of water and a small hot towel in front of Alara. "Coffee, black, please," Alara managed to say, her voice sounding thin to her own ears. "Get her a coffee," Damien said to the attendant without looking up from the tablet he'd already produced. "And bring the site specifications, the full topographicals." He looked at Alara. "You travel light. I like that. It's efficient." He was referring to her single small carry-on bag which the co-pilot had stowed, the bag that contained her entire life. She, however, was thinking of the two people at the fence, Mark, who was cutting out the dead weight, Isabella, who was posing with borrowed champagne. They were weighed down by so much. The jet moved with a power she had never experienced. There was no rattling, no slow, lumbering climb. The engines thrummed and the force pushed her back into the deep leather. Within seconds, they were punching through the thick, gray New Jersey clouds, bursting out into a realm of brilliant, blinding, endless blue. Alara stared out the window at the sun-drenched landscape of the upper atmosphere. She was literally above the life that had tried to crush her. "The site in London, it's problematic," Damien said, breaking the silence. He'd projected a holographic map onto the table between them. "It's Canary Wharf. The water table is high, the foundation will be a nightmare, and the city council is breathing down my neck about the carbon footprint." Alara tore her eyes from the window. The fog of her old life evaporated, replaced by the sharp, clear focus of her work. "It's not a problem," she said, her voice suddenly steady. "It's the solution. The high water table is perfect. We don't fight it, we use it. We'll build the foundation around a closed-loop geothermal exchange. It will heat and cool the entire building for almost zero net energy. It's the only way to meet the council's demands, and it will be the centerpiece of the design." Damien stared at her. He didn't smile, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "My engineers said that was a 30% cost overrun on the foundation." "Your engineers are looking at it as an expense," Alara countered, leaning forward, her old fear gone, replaced by the authority of her talent. "It's an investment. Based on my models, the geothermal loop will pay for itself in 9.7 years. After that, your HVAC budget, the single largest energy cost for a building this size, is practically zero. You're not losing 30% on the foundation. You're saving 60% on the building's 50-year lifespan. It's not expensive. It's the only logical choice. Damien was silent for a full minute. The only sound was the faint hum of the engines. Good, he said finally. Do it. What's next? For the next 7 hours they worked. They didn't talk. They sparred. They deconstructed her design and rebuilt it stronger. He challenged her on alloys, on light management, on tensile strength. She met him at every turn, not with defensiveness, but with data, with vision, with the unshakable confidence of a person who knew her craft. When the flight attendant served a full hot meal, Alara realized she hadn't eaten in nearly 24 hours. She ate hungrily as Damien outlined the legal and logistical team she would have at her disposal. She was not a damsel being rescued. She was an expert being deployed. The news broke 2 days after they landed in London. Alara was in her new base of operations, a stunning minimalist penthouse apartment in a private Lockhart-owned building in Mayfair, an apartment that Damien had simply handed her the keys to. You can't design a building in London from a hotel room, he'd said. You need a home. My team is at your disposal. A crisp British woman named Anya, her new chief of staff, brought her a tray with coffee and a copy of the Financial Times. Congratulations on the announcement, Ms. Vance, Anya said with a small professional smile. Alara looked down. There on the front page of the world's most respected financial paper was her rendering of the Ethelgard, and the headline, Lockhart taps unknown, Alara Vance for 500 million, London HQ, a living building vision. The story was about her. Her. Alara Vance, an architect of singular vision, poised to redefine the London skyline. The A article, of course, found its way back across the Atlantic. Mark was at his desk regaling a junior colleague with an exaggerated story about his crazy ex-wife. And so she's there at Teterboro, can you believe it? Probably washing the windows. And Izzy and I are just so embarrassed for her, you know. It's sad. She's just completely lost. Hey, Mark, another analyst said, looking up from his monitor, his face pale. Is your ex-wife's name Alara Vance? Yeah, why? Mark said, annoyed at the interruption. The analyst slowly turned his monitor. On the homepage of FT.com was Alara's face next to her design. Mark's blood ran cold. The laughter died in his throat. That's a mistake. That's impossible. Mark, the voice came from the doorway. It was Mr. Harrison, a senior partner. He looked apoplectic. My office. Now. Mark walked into the vast corner office like a man walking to the gallows. Harrison didn't tell him to sit. Explain this. Harrison said, his voice a low growl, slapping a copy of the Financial Times onto his desk. Alara Vance, the architect for the Lockhart project. The £500 million project my team has been bleeding for, pitching for, dying for 18 months. Sir, a project I might add, Harrison continued, his voice rising, that you were a junior analyst on, a project you sat in meetings for, and you never thought to mention that the architect who had the inside track was your wife. Ex-wife, sir, and I didn't know she's a waitress. This is a scam, or she's sleeping with him. Sleeping with him? Harrison barked a laugh. You think Damien Lockhart chooses his architects that way? You think this woman, he tapped her rendering, got this job by being a waitress? This is genius, and you missed it. Sir, it's not my fault. It becomes your fault, Harrison roared, when I get a call from Teterboro Security billing the firm for a public disturbance caused by one of my analysts when you were seen and reported harassing Mr. Lockhart's personal guest. It was a misunderstanding, Mark pleaded, sweat beading on his forehead. Was this a misunderstanding too? Harrison spun his monitor around. Isabella, in her infinite wisdom, had not deleted the stalker video. In fact, she had reposted it, furious at the backlash she was getting. Can't believe this is what @Mark Stevenson's crazy ex-wife will do to stalk us, how psycho. The comments were brutal. Dude, that's Alara Vance. She just got the Lockhart contract. That's not a stalker, that's Damien Lockhart's G650. This video is of you harassing the architect of the year. You're the psycho. Harrison looked at Mark with pure, unadulterated contempt. You are screaming at the most important potential client in the Western Hemisphere. You are harassing the architect he handpicked. You, Mark, are a public juvenile and catastrophic liability. You didn't just fail to get the whale. You shot a harpoon at it, missed, and hit our boat. Get your things. Security will escort you out. Mark was fired by noon. He went to a bar. He called Isabella expecting, he didn't know what. Sympathy. Mark, you have to take that video down, she shrieked. People are dragging me. My engagement is ruined. They're all on her side. They're saying I look cheap. They're calling me a fence clinger. Izzy, I got fired. Mark whispered, the whiskey sour on the bar tasting like ash. There was a long, cold silence. Fired? What do you mean, fired? Harrison fired me. Because of the airport. Because of the video. Another silence. So, that Porsche, that's a lease, isn't it? She asked, her voice flat. You're not on the partner track. You're not even on the track. You're unemployed. Izzy, babe, it's just a setback. You are just as bad as her, Isabella spat. No, you're worse. She's rich. You're just nothing. Don't call me again. I'm blocking you. The click was as final as the door on the Gulf Stream. 6 months later, the World Architecture Forum in Geneva, the largest, most prestigious gathering of architects, engineers, and developers on the planet. The keynote speaker was the woman who had come from nowhere and was now suddenly everywhere. Alara Vance. She stood on the massive stage not in her old sheath dress, but in a simple, elegant, dark blue Acris pantsuit. She was not the nervous, trembling woman from the penthouse. She was poised, confident, and radiant. We were told to build higher, she said, her voice clear and resonant, filling the 3,000-seat auditorium. We chose to build deeper. The Ethelgard is not just a building. It is an ecosystem. It challenges the very idea that human endeavor must come at the cost of the natural world. It proves that we can build not on the planet, but with it. The future is not about glass boxes in the sky. It is about living, breathing. In the back of the auditorium, a man in a rumpled, ill-fitting gray blazer was emptying a trash bin. He moved slowly, his back aching. He had been blacklisted. Liability was the word that followed him everywhere. The Porsche was gone. The apartment was gone. He was living in a studio in the Bronx and working for a temp staffing agency that serviced events. He heard the applause. It was thunderous, a standing ovation. It washed over him, a sound of mockery. He watched as the woman on stage, Alara, smiled and waved. He watched as she walked off stage into the wings where a tall, dark-haired man was waiting for her. Damien Lockhart. Mark ducked back into the shadows of the service corridor, his hands white on the handle of his trash cart. He watched them. Alara didn't rush into Damien's arms. He didn't kiss her. He simply handed her a tablet. Brilliant as always, Damien said. Now about the water reclamation models for the Dubai project. Alara laughed, a sound so clear and full of life it made Mark's stomach twist. Damien, can't I have 5 minutes? And stop calling it a project. It's a self-sustaining city. Semantics, Damien said with that rare small smile. The desert aquifer data just came in. I need your eyes on them. They don't see what you see. They walked right past the corridor where Mark was hiding. They were deep in conversation, Alara already pointing at the tablet, her face alive with passion and new ideas. She didn't see him. She didn't even look in his direction. She was so far beyond him, so absorbed in her future, that the past, the man she'd once loved, the man who had broken her, was not even a speck in her rearview mirror. Mark was left alone in the dark with the smell of stale coffee and discarded programs. He had flaunted his new life, his new car, his new girlfriend. And in one terrible, blinding moment of clarity, he realized it was all just a cheap, hollow performance. He had cut out the dead weight, and in doing so had discovered that he was the one who was sinking. He had always been the one who was stuck. And Elara was in the sun sketching the plans for a new world. He thought her life was over, but he was the one who was left with nothing. Elara's story shows us that your value is not defined by the people who dismiss you, but by the talent you nurture in secret. The person who underestimated her the most was the one who had the most to lose. Mark lost his job, his status, and his future, all while Elara was literally flying above him. What did you think of Mark's epic downfall? What was the most satisfying part of Elara's revenge? Let me know in the comments below. If you loved this story, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to see that the best revenge is success. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story of karmic justice. Thank you for watching.